I had always imagined love as something soft and gradual, like the first warm wind of spring that slips through an open window and gently stirs the curtains. It would arrive quietly, almost unnoticed, brushing against the soul without fanfare or drama. That was the version of romance I had carried with me since I was a teenager, careful, cautious, safe. But life, as it often does, had other plans. My name is Chloe Thorne, and at 22 I was just another face in the crowd of students at Georgia State University in Atlanta. My days were built on a predictable rhythm. Early morning lectures on 19th century literature, afternoons buried in the library with stacks of books and endless notes, evenings spent working part-time at a small independent bookstore near campus, and then the long commute home on the MARTA train. The train was my daily purgatory, crowded, overheated, filled with the low hum of tired conversations and the occasional announcement crackling over the speakers. I usually spent those rides with my headphones in, staring at my reflection in the dark window, willing the minutes to pass faster. It was a Tuesday in early fall, one of those ordinary days when the sky hangs low and gray, threatening rain that never quite arrives. My last class had run late. The professor lost in a passionate tangent about symbolism in Virginia, Woolf's novels, and by the time I made it to the bus stop, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones. My backpack felt heavier than usual. My tote bag dug into my shoulder, and all I wanted was to get home, collapse onto my narrow bed in the shared apartment, and sleep until the world made sense again. The bus was already packed when it pulled up, standing room only, bodies pressed together in that peculiar intimacy that public transit forces upon strangers. I squeezed through the doors, found a spot near the middle, and immediately dropped my gaze to the scuffed floor. That was my rule: don't make eye contact, don't invite conversation, just disappear into the background until my stop. Then I heard it. Take my seat. The voice was deep, warm, carrying an effortless confidence that cut through the noise of the bus, like a single clear note in a chaotic symphony. I looked up slowly, almost against my will, and there he was. Tall, easily over 6 feet, broad-shouldered, wearing a charcoal gray wool coat that fit him so perfectly it looked custom-made. His dark hair was slightly tousled from the wind outside, and his eyes, a striking hazel flecked with gold, held mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. But it was his smile that undid me. Open, genuine, the kind that reached his eyes and made the rest of the crowded bus fade away for a heartbeat. I blinked, caught off guard. "Oh, no, it's okay, Please," he insisted gently, already stepping aside. "You look like you've had a long day." There was no pity in his tone, just quiet understanding. Before I could protest again, my legs moved on their own, and I sank into the seat. The relief was immediate. My aching feet thanked me silently. I murmured a soft, "Thank you," barely audible over the rumble of the engine. Most people would have turned away then, pulled out their phone, disappeared into their own world. But he didn't. He stayed standing right there, one hand wrapped around the overhead rail, close enough that I could smell the faint cedar and citrus of his cologne. He didn't stare exactly. He observed, with a curiosity that felt respectful rather than intrusive. After a few stops, he spoke again. "You don't look like you're from around here." His voice carried a faint accent, not strong enough to place immediately, but enough to make the words feel polished, almost musical. I glanced up, surprised. I am, actually. Born and raised in Atlanta, just a student at GSU. He nodded as if that answered some unspoken question. "That explains it." "Explains what?" I asked, a small smile tugging at my lips despite myself. "The way you carry yourself, like someone who's always rushing. Between two worlds, books and real life, and trying not to let either one win." I laughed softly, caught off guard by how accurately he'd read me in under a minute. "You're pretty observant for a stranger on a bus." "Only when something or someone catches my attention," he replied, his smile widening just enough to show a hint of mischief. And just like that, the conversation began. We talked about everything and nothing. Hidden coffee shops in Little Five, points with mismatched furniture, and the best chai lattes in the city. The secret paths through Piedmont Park, where you could walk for hours and pretend the city didn't exist. The way Georgia weather could flip from sweater weather mornings to shorts and tank top, afternoons without warning. He listened, really listened, in a way I wasn't used to. No interruptions, no half-hearted nods while checking his phone. His eyes stayed on mine, and every time I spoke, he leaned in just a fraction, as if he didn't want to miss a single word. I don't open up easily. Years of watching my mother struggle alone, of seeing my sister's dreams shattered, had taught me to keep people at arm's length. But with him, the words came without effort. It felt safe, natural. When the bus finally approached my stop, I stood reluctantly, slinging my bag over my shoulder. I turned to thank him again and to say goodbye, but before I could, he spoke. "Wait, can I have your number? I'd really like to see you again." My heart stuttered. Normally, the answer would have been an automatic no. I had rules. No strangers, no risks, no letting anyone close enough to hurt me. But something in his gaze, open, earnest, without a trace of arrogance, made the words stick in my throat. I hesitated only a second. Then, with fingers that trembled just slightly, I pulled out my phone and handed it to him. "Sure." He typed his number in quickly, then sent himself a text so he'd have mine. When he handed the phone back, our fingers brushed, and a small electric spark raced up my arm. "I'm Ethan," he said, as if we'd forgotten the most basic formality in the rush of conversation. "Ethan Vance." Chloe Thorne." The bus doors hissed open. I stepped off, legs unsteady, and glanced back once. He was still standing there, watching me with that same easy smile, the city lights catching in his eyes. That night, my phone buzzed just as I was slipping into bed. A simple message. "Good night, Chloe. Thank you for making a Tuesday feel like something special. Talk soon, Ethan." I stared at the screen for a long time, a slow warmth spreading through my chest. For the first time in years, the walls I'd built around my heart felt thinner. The next evening, he texted again, asking if I was free the following night. Before I could overthink it, I said yes. He picked a restaurant I'd only ever walked past, a sleek, upscale place downtown with gilded lamps, valet parking, and a waiting list that stretched weeks. I stood outside in my one good black dress, smoothing the fabric nervously, feeling like an imposter in a world of crystal chandeliers and luxury cars. My heart pounded so hard I was sure the valet could hear it. Then Ethan appeared. Same luminous smile, same gray coat draped over his shoulders like it belonged there. He extended his hand, and when I took it, he lifted it to his lips in a gesture so old-fashioned, so unexpectedly tender, that my insecurities melted for a moment. "You look incredible," he murmured. And in that instant, standing under the warm glow of the entrance lights, I believed him. Dinner was magic. He ordered wine with names I couldn't pronounce, but he did it without pretension, just quiet confidence. He spoke about his childhood in Europe, summers in the south of France, winters in the Alps. His adoptive parents, Julian and Meredith Vance, were art collectors who divided their time between Manhattan and Monaco. There was no bragging, only stories shared with the same ease he breathed. When he turned the questions to me, my classes, my favorite authors, my dreams beyond graduation, he listened with an intensity that made me feel like the most important person in the room. No one had ever paid attention to me that way. By the time we stepped outside, the night air cool against my skin, I realized something startling. I didn't want the evening to end. What followed was a whirlwind. Good morning texts arrived before my alarm. Good night messages came long after I'd drifted off. He showed up at the university entrance on my hardest mornings, 2 coffees in hand, one black for him, one with just the right amount of cream and sugar for me. When deadlines loomed and stress coiled tight in my chest, he'd send ridiculous memes or silly voice notes until laughter pushed the worry away. One afternoon, he appeared at my apartment door with an armful of sunflowers. "Just because," he said simply, as if thinking of me was the most natural thing in the world. Our dates multiplied. Study sessions turned into long conversations over library tables. Walks through downtown Atlanta ended under strings of city lights, his hand brushing mine until I finally let him take it. Weekends at Piedmont Park became our ritual. Picnics, reading aloud from whatever book I was studying, lying on the grass watching clouds drift by. Late-night phone calls stretched until dawn. Sometimes we talked about everything. Sometimes we just listened to each other breathe, the silence comfortable and warm. For the first time in years, I felt seen, valued, like I mattered. The walls I'd built so carefully began to crack. One evening, on the balcony of his sleek city apartment, the Atlanta skyline glittering below us like a sea of stars, Ethan took my hand. "I want you to meet my parents," he said casually. My pulse jumped. Already? We've only been this for a few weeks. He smiled that disarming smile. Trust me, Chloe, you're different. They'll love you. In that moment, staring into his eyes, I wanted to believe him more than anything. I had no idea that the lightning bolt I'd welcomed so openly was about to reveal its darker side. The invitation to meet? Ethan's parents arrived like a velvet glove, hiding something sharp beneath. I spent the entire week before the dinner oscillating, between nervous excitement and quiet dread. Every time I thought about stepping into the Vance world, into the polished, expensive reality Ethan had only hinted at, I felt like I was preparing to walk across a frozen lake, unsure whether the ice would hold. Ethan picked me up that Saturday evening in his sleek black Audi, the kind of car that purred rather than roared. He wore a tailored navy blazer over a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to show the expensive watch on his wrist. When he saw me in my simple navy midi dress, the most elegant thing I owned, he smiled like I'd stepped out of a dream. "You're perfect," he said, kissing my cheek before opening the passenger door for me. The drive took us out of the familiar grid of downtown Atlanta and into the hushed, tree-lined streets of Buckhead's most exclusive neighborhoods. The houses grew larger, the lawns more manicured, the gates taller and more forbidding. Streetlights were softer here, almost decorative. When we turned into a private drive flanked by stone pillars, my stomach twisted. The Vance residence appeared at the end of the curving driveway like something out of an architecture magazine. Modern lines of glass and steel, warm interior light spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows. A reflecting pool in the front courtyard that mirrored the rising moon. It wasn't ostentatious in a flashy way. It was quietly, confidently wealthy. Ethan squeezed my hand as we stepped out of the car. "They're going to love you. Just be yourself." Meredith Vance opened the door before we even reached it. She was tall and willowy, silver hair swept into an elegant chignon, wearing a cream silk blouse and tailored black trousers that probably cost more than my entire semester's rent. Her smile was practiced, warm, welcoming, but somehow measured. "Chloe, darling," she said, air-kissing both my cheeks. "We've heard so much about you." Behind her stood Julian Vance, broad-shouldered like his son, but with a colder, more appraising gaze. His suit was charcoal, his cufflinks glinting under the hallway chandelier. He offered a firm handshake and a polite, "Pleasure to meet you, Chloe." The foyer alone could have swallowed my entire apartment. Marble floors, a sweeping staircase, abstract paintings on the walls that I instinctively knew were originals. Everything smelled faintly of expensive candles, sandalwood and bergamot. We moved into the dining room, where a long ebony table had been set for four with military precision. Gleaming silver flatware, crystal stemware, white orchids floating in shallow bowls. A bottle of red wine already breathing beside four glasses. Dinner began with the kind of effortless choreography that only comes from years of practice. Servers appeared and disappeared silently, bringing courses that looked more like art than food. Seared scallops with microgreens, then a perfectly pink rack of lamb, followed by a delicate chocolate soufflé that rose like a cloud. Conversation flowed politely at first. My literature studies at GSU, favorite authors, impressions of Atlanta. Meredith asked thoughtful questions. Julian nodded occasionally, offering brief, measured comments. Ethan kept his hand resting lightly on mine under the table, a small anchor. I tried to relax. I told myself this was just rich people being rich. They weren't judging me. They were curious, but something felt off. Every smile seemed rehearsed, every pause calculated. It was like watching actors perform a scene they'd done many times before. Halfway through dessert, some kind of raspberry tart with gold leaf, Meredith tilted her head toward Julian and spoke in French, her voice low, almost conspiratorial. "Elle ne sait pas pourquoi nous avons besoin d'elle, n'est-ce pas?" The words landed like ice water down my spine. I froze, spoon halfway to my mouth. My roommate's warning from weeks earlier echoed in my head. If they speak French, pretend you don't understand. I'd taken 2 semesters of French just to fulfill an elective requirement. I wasn't fluent, but I understood enough. She doesn't know why we need her, does she? My heart slammed against my ribs so hard I was sure they could hear it. Ethan responded in the same language, voice calm and low. "Non, elle ne sait rien." No, she doesn't know anything. I forced my expression to stay neutral. I even managed a small, Polite smile when Meredith turned back to me and complimented my dress in English. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the spoon down and clasp them in my lap. The rest of the meal passed in a surreal blur. I answered questions mechanically. I laughed when I was supposed to. I complimented the food, the house, the wine. But inside, my mind was screaming. Why do they need me? What don't I know? What is Ethan hiding? When dessert plates were finally cleared, Meredith suggested coffee on the terrace. The night air was cool, scented with jasmine from the garden below. City lights glittered in the distance like scattered diamonds. Ethan stood behind me, arms loosely around my waist, chin resting on my shoulder. "They adore you," he whispered. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Later, in the car on the way back to my apartment, he glanced over at me. "What did you think?" "They're very sophisticated," I said carefully. He laughed softly. "They can be intimidating. Don't take it personally. They've lived in a very different world for a long time." I stared out the window at the passing streetlights, the words repeating in my head like a curse. She doesn't know why we need her. That night I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Meredith's cool smile, heard those quiet French words. I kept telling myself I was being paranoid. Maybe I'd misunderstood. My French wasn't perfect. Maybe they were talking about something else entirely. But deep down, I knew better. The next 2 weeks were a strange dance between doubt and denial. Ethan was still perfect, still attentive, still the man who brought me coffee on rainy mornings and sent me voice notes, saying he missed my laugh. We went to Piedmont Park one Sunday, lay on a blanket under turning leaves, read poetry aloud to each other. He kissed me slowly under the oak trees, and for a few minutes the doubt receded, but it always came back. I started noticing small things, the way he sometimes answered calls in another room, voice too low for me to hear, the way his phone screen lit up with names I didn't recognize, European-sounding ones, and he'd silence them quickly. The casual mentions of family, business, that never quite explained what the business actually was. One evening, while he was in the shower at my apartment, his phone buzzed on the coffee table. I didn't mean to look, but the preview message flashed across the screen in French. "Maman, tout est prêt pour le week-end prochain. Elle mord à l'hameçon." I knew enough to translate. "Mom, everything is ready for next weekend. She's taking the bait." My stomach dropped. When Ethan came out, towel around his waist, hair damp, he saw my face and immediately frowned. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just tired." "Long week?" He kissed my forehead. "Get some rest, love. I'll head out so you can sleep." After he left, I sat on my couch for a long time, staring at nothing. I didn't tell anyone, not my mother, not my sister, not even my roommate. I was afraid saying it out loud would make it real. Then came the weekend invitation. Ethan appeared at my door on a Thursday evening, leaning casually against the frame, smiling like he was offering me the moon. "We're escaping this weekend," he said. "I booked a cabin on Lake Oconee. Just you and me. No city, no stress, no parents. We need a break." I hesitated. Something in his eyes flickered. Concern, maybe, or calculation. "You've been tense lately, Chloe. Let me take care of you. I promise it'll do you good." I wanted to believe him so badly that I ignored the warning bells. "Okay," I whispered. "Let's go." The drive was beautiful. Golden hills, wildflowers bending in the wind, Ethan humming softly to the radio. For a few hours I let myself pretend everything was normal. The cabin was perfect. Cedar and stone, wraparound porch. Windows overlooking the lake turning molten in the sunset. Inside smelled of pine and clean linen. A fire already laid in the stone fireplace. Wine chilling in a bucket. Groceries neatly unpacked. Ethan wrapped his arms around me from behind. "See? Perfect for us." We cooked pasta together, laughing when sauce splattered on my cheek. We opened the wine. He toasted, to us, eyes glowing in the firelight. Every time my glass was half empty, he refilled it without asking. I didn't notice how much I was drinking until the room began to tilt. "Ethan, I'm really tired," I mumbled, words thick and slow. He was at my side instantly, gentle, guiding me to the couch. "Sleep, darling. Just rest." His voice sounded different, too calm, too controlled. The darkness rushed in before I could fight it. When I woke, I was no longer on the couch. The floor was cold concrete. My wrists burned, rope bit into my skin, binding my hands behind my back, my ankles tied together. A single bare bulb swung overhead, throwing harsh shadows across damp walls. Panic clawed up my throat. "Ethan?" Footsteps on wooden stairs, slow, deliberate. He descended into the light, face calm, almost tender. "Chloe," he said softly, crouching in front of me. "You don't understand now, but you will." He reached out, brushed hair from my face with the same gentleness he'd used 1,000 times before. "This is going to change your life. Soon you'll thank me." Terror and betrayal collided inside me like a storm. The man who had made me believe in love was the same. Man who had tied me up in a basement, and I had walked right into the trap. The basement light bulb flickered once, twice, then steadied into a sickly yellow glow that made everything look jaundiced. My wrists throbbed where the rope had cut into them, but the pain felt distant compared to the betrayal burning in my chest. Ethan knelt in front of me, close enough that I could smell the same cedar and citrus, cologne that had once made my heart race. Now it made me want to retch. "You'll understand soon," he repeated softly, as if he were comforting a frightened child. "This isn't about hurting you, Chloe. It's about giving you a better life." "A better life?" My voice cracked, raw from screaming into the dark earlier. "You drugged me. You tied me up. You lied about everything." His expression didn't waver. If anything, it softened further, almost pitying. "You were drowning in that small, ordinary life," he said. "A student scraping by, taking the bus, worrying about rent and grades. I saw something more in you, something valuable. I'm offering you a way out." I laughed, a bitter, broken sound. "By selling me to someone else?" He didn't deny it. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded passport. When he opened it, my own face stared back at me, but the name beneath the photo read Alara Ashford. "Warren Ashford," Ethan said quietly. "Tech billionaire. Lost his daughter 17 years ago, kidnapped. From a private school in Switzerland. Never found her. He spent hundreds of millions searching. Private investigators, reward funds, psychics, everything. He's desperate. And you..." He tilted his head, studying me like a rare painting. "You look exactly like the age-progressed photos his team released last year. Same bone structure, same eyes. DNA can be faked. Documents can be forged, but resemblance like yours? That's gold." My stomach heaved. "So I disappear. Chloe Thorne vanishes. And I become his long-lost daughter forever? You'd have everything," Ethan said, almost pleading now. "Money, security, a family that's been searching for you your whole life. No more late shifts at the bookstore. No more worrying if the electricity bill will get paid. You'd be safe, cherished." "Safe?" I spat the word. "Like I was safe with you?" For the first time, something flickered behind his calm mask. Regret, maybe, or guilt. "It vanished quickly. I never wanted to hurt you," he murmured. "I fell for you, Chloe. That part wasn't a lie. But the plan? The plan was already in motion before I even met you on that bus. My parents chose you months ago. I was supposed to get close, gain your trust, prepare you. I didn't expect to actually care." I stared at him, tears burning tracks down my cheeks. "Then let me go." He looked away. "I can't. They're already arranging the handover. In 48 hours, you'll be on a private flight to Zurich. New identity, new life. You'll thank me one day." He stood, brushing dust from his knees. "Rest. I'll bring you water and something to eat soon." When the door at the top of the stairs clicked shut, the darkness swallowed me again. But I wasn't finished. I twisted my wrists, ignoring the fresh sting of torn skin. The rope was tight, but not perfect. I rocked side to side until I could reach the rough wooden beam behind me. There, a jutting rusted nail. I maneuvered my bound hands until the rope caught on the sharp point and began to saw. Minutes stretched into agony. Sweat stung my eyes. My shoulders screamed. But strand by strand, the rope began to fray. When my right hand finally slipped free, I nearly sobbed with relief. The rest was faster. Ankles next. Then I stood, legs trembling, blood rushing painfully back into numb limbs. The small window high on the wall was my only exit. I dragged an old crate beneath it, climbed, pushed the frame open with shaking arms, and squeezed through. The night air hit like a slap, cold, pine-scented, alive. I ran. Branches tore at my arms and face. Roots tripped me. I fell twice, knees splitting on rocks, but each time I got up faster. Behind me, I heard the cabin door slam open. "Chloe!" His voice, once so warm, now sounded desperate. I didn't stop. Through the trees, I caught a flicker of light. Another cabin. Smoke curling from a chimney. I sprinted toward it, lungs burning, and pounded on the door with both fists. "Help, please, someone help me!" The door flew open. A tall man filled the frame. Broad shoulders. Close-cropped graying hair. Eyes sharp with instant alertness. At his side, a large German shepherd bared teeth and growled low. "What's going on?" the man demanded. "My boyfriend, he drugged me, tied me up, he's coming." The man didn't hesitate. "Duke, go." The dog shot into the darkness like black lightning, barking furiously. In the distance came a sharp curse, then crashing footsteps retreating. The man pulled me inside and bolted the door. "I'm Marcus Sterling," he said, guiding me to a worn armchair. "You're safe here." My body shook so violently my teeth chattered. Marcus draped a thick blanket over my shoulders, then stepped away to call the sheriff's department. His voice stayed calm, precise, like someone who had given orders under pressure before. When he hung up, he crouched in front of me. "Breathe, Chloe. The worst is over." I wanted to believe him. Sirens arrived 20 minutes later, red and blue lights cutting through the trees. Deputies took my statement on the porch while search teams moved into the woods. Marcus stood nearby, arms crossed, Duke sitting watchful at his feet. They found the cabin empty. Ethan had vanished, but the evidence remained. Ropes, empty sedative vials, forged documents, my photo on the fake passport. Enough to issue warrants. The next morning, I sat in a fluorescent-lit interview room at the county sheriff's office, wrapped in another blanket, clutching a paper cup of water I couldn't drink. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Detective Aisha Patel entered with quiet authority. Dark hair pulled back, sharp eyes that missed nothing. She sat across from me and waited until I met her gaze. "Start from the beginning," she said gently. "Everything," I told her. The bus, the first date, the French conversation at dinner, the weekend escape, the basement, the passport, the name Ilara Ashford. When I finished, Patel closed her notebook. "That matches what we've been building for months," she said. I stared at her. "You knew?" "We've had the Vance family under surveillance since last spring. They run a sophisticated international fraud operation. They target wealthy families searching for missing loved ones, lost heirs, kidnapped children, runaways. They groom lookalikes, fabricate evidence, and sell them back to desperate parents for millions. Your resemblance to Warren Ashford's daughter was flagged 6 months ago. We just didn't know who they'd chosen until Ethan started spending time with you." My throat closed. "So he never—" "I'm sorry, Chloe. To him, you were the final piece in a very expensive puzzle." I cried then, quiet, ugly sobs that hurt my ribs. Patel slid a box of tissues across the table and waited. 48 hours later, Julian and Meredith Vance were arrested at a private airstrip outside Atlanta. Suitcases packed for Monaco. False passports, encrypted drives, bank records linking them to at least 7 similar scams across Europe and the United States. Ethan was found 2 days after that, hiding in an abandoned textile warehouse on the city's west side. When agents cuffed him, he didn't resist. He only asked one question: "Is she okay?" The agent didn't answer. I spent the next weeks in a fog. Nightmares woke me sweating, convinced I was still tied up in the dark. The smell of red wine made me nauseous. A gray coat on the street sent my heart into my throat. I moved back home with my mother for a while. Donna didn't ask many questions, just cooked. Pots of stew simmered on the stove day and night. She'd set a bowl in front of me and sit quietly while I tried to eat. Brianna came every day. She sat on the edge of my bed and didn't try to fix me. She just said, "I know what it feels like to lose who you thought you were. It doesn't mean you're gone forever." Marcus checked in too. At first it was just phone calls, short, careful. Then porch visits. He'd bring Duke, who would lie across my feet like a living blanket. Marcus didn't talk much. He just sat with me in the silence, letting me exist without having to perform okay. One evening, as the sun sank behind the pines, he told me his story. "Lost my wife and daughter in a car accident 7 years ago. Drunk driver. I was overseas, military deployment. Came home to an empty house and a folded flag. Left the service. Moved out here. Built walls. Thought that was it." He looked at me then, really looked. "Then you came pounding on my door in the middle of the night, scared out of your mind. And I realized maybe the walls weren't keeping pain out. Maybe they were keeping life out." I reached for his hand, our fingers laced together like they'd been waiting. Healing wasn't linear, but it happened in fragments. Detective Patel called weeks later with news. Using leads from the Vances' seized documents, authorities had located Warren Ashford's actual daughter, alive, living under a different name in Canada, raised by the very people who'd taken her. The reunion made international headlines. Warren, grateful beyond words for my cooperation and testimony, quietly funded, Brianna's reconstructive surgery, the one her insurance had always denied. When Brianna walked out of recovery and took her first supported steps without pain, she cried harder than I'd ever seen. Then she hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe. I'm going to dance again, Chloe, because of you. One spring afternoon, Marcus took me back to the lake near his cabin. The water shimmered gold. Duke raced ahead, tail whipping. Marcus stopped on the dock, pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, and opened it. A simple silver band with a single tiny sapphire, my birthstone. I thought love had ended for me, he said, voice rough. Then you showed up in the dark, asking for help. I don't have much to offer, just a quiet life, a loyal dog, and a heart that's finally beating again. But if you'll have me, Chloe, I want to spend the rest of my days making sure you never feel unsafe again. Tears blurred the ring. Yes, I whispered, yes. The wedding was small. Brianna danced at the reception, slow, careful steps in a flowing white dress. But every movement was a victory. Marcus held me as we watched, his thumb brushing circles on my back. Months later, unpacking boxes in the little house we'd bought together, I found the positive pregnancy test in the bathroom drawer. I walked onto the porch, looked up at the stars, placed my hand on my still flat stomach and whispered, "We're safe now." And for the first time in a long time, I believed it. Life had shattered me once, tried to remake me into someone else's ghost. But from the ruins, something real had grown. Love that listened, family that stayed, hope that refused to die. And somewhere in the quiet spaces between nightmares and dawn, I finally learned that the most beautiful things often bloom where the darkness was deepest.